Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey, welcome back. It's another episode of the Better Sex Podcast. This is Jessa. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Really grateful you are here. I have been on a roll lately talking to people about sexual pleasure and embodiment. You know, I batch record these shows, so it's always sort of interesting. I record them in whatever order I kind of move through the guest list, and then I try to vary the topics when they're released. So you may not have heard all the episodes about pleasure and embodiment, but I am recording them all in a row, which is really interesting. And it's an important topic because, you know, part of what I'm talking to people about all the time and working with people in my program with, you know, in the Intimacy with Ease method is about accessing desire and helping people with little to no libido or little to no connection to their body or whatever obstacles they've got that are blocking them from that. And today's topic fits right in there. I'm talking about bodyfullness as opposed to mindfulness with Dr. Rachel Allyn. And she came up with the term on her own, but other people have also come up with it because it's a needed concept. The ability to use connection and movement and physical awareness in addition to paying attention to our thoughts and feelings, to not only to move through trauma and to just get to know ourselves, but to really open up to pleasure. It makes sense. So we're having this wonderful conversation about what bodyfullness is, the various kinds of pleasure as she sees it, and how we access those and how they interrelate, and then how all of this informs our sexual relationship with our partner. I hope you enjoy the episode and get a ton out of it. And before we start the show today, it is sponsored by Intimacy with Ease. It's a method to help otherwise happy couples achieve a sex life that is easy and fun for both of them, so that you can actually just enjoy your sex life with zero stress. For more information, if you want to watch a brief little training video that's available, all of that, go to intimacywithease.com. Rachel, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Jessa. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here.
I want to launch right in with this word, bodyfullness. I'm intrigued. What does that mean? What made you come up with that? I mean, I assume it's your word, but, you know, what is it?
Well, and I should say that I did start using the word without knowing about anyone else using it. But then there's also, around the time that I had done my TEDx talk on this word, a book called Bodyfullness came out by Christine Caldwell. But she also said she did not find the word, that it's sort of been used here or there. But I think we're both on a mission to have it be something that's part of our vocabulary. And the fact that we felt the need to even create the word, I think is a testament to the fact that it is describing a concept that really doesn't exist or isn't as valued in our culture, but we think it should be. Yeah, with that being said, bodyfullness is really, it's about embodied mindfulness, but then that next step beyond mindfulness that recognizes the ways that trauma lives in our body and that it needs movement, and that next step as far as releasing and discharging strategies, so expression and exercise and tears and crying, really that idea of release and also containment, whether it be, you know, giving ourselves a hug or getting a hug, or ways to just sort of ground and center ourselves, that need to come from the mindfulness in order to self-regulate. And that once we have those tools in our toolbox, we can really open up more to not just living from survival mode, but living from a place that has more body confidence and trust, that opens us up to some of those things a little higher up on the pyramid, such as life's pleasures. And so it's a somatic method, but it really goes to that next step of also owning our right to life's pleasures and giving ourselves mental permission for that in a world or rather a country really, that has labeled pleasure a dirty word.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you're saying that, because I was thinking, wow, is this only trauma based, but it seems like, I don't know, releasing trauma and moving past that is one stage, but then you would be into like, wait, how do we really get body full, even just about pleasure and, I don't know, exponential growth.
Yeah. It's really about, I think for people who have more complex trauma, obviously, to even get to the layers of bodyfullness is much slower. But I think all of us are really members of the trauma club in one form or the other, especially when we even think of intergenerational trauma and just day-to-day, the collective trauma that we've had with the pandemic, or day-to-day stress and how it requires self-regulation practices. And why I really, as a relationship and sex therapist, I felt it was so important to start from the body up, because I would talk with people who, they wanted to have some things like, amazing orgasms and, a stronger libido. They wanted these things, but yet they didn't even like their body. They didn't know their body. They didn't trust their body. They didn't move their body.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand how I could help them without really just helping them be more at home in their body and find pleasures in their body, even outside of the bedroom, whether it be in nature, in playfulness, in flow states, some of these other types of pleasure in their body.
Yeah, it seems to me there's a thread there that therapy, talk therapy, which I do too, right? It's so heady. And even mindfulness, like sit in stillness, right? Totally still and quiet and just go inward. Even that, you might be in touch with your body, but it's so interesting that you're so focused on the movement and expression part of this. And it seems so obvious now that you say it.
Absolutely. That's a big part. Pleasure is in the title of my book, The Pleasure is All Yours, but it's really also a book about combating repression and all the stuff that we hold on to and this sort of buttoned up, keep it in and be stoic. And so that's a big part of my work. But yeah, I think that, it really starts from the body up in order to be able to share in ourselves with other people.
So tell me just a little bit about your journey in this. Like, in what order did this stuff happen in? Were you a therapist first and thinking, oh, I need there's something missing here if people can't even be in their body? Or were you a body movement person first? Like, how has this come to be so much your focus?
Well, I grew up with a mom who really encouraged a sex positive household. So just as far as my reproductive body, I think I felt really comfortable there. And then my dad had more of the emphasis on really encouraging me as an athlete. And it wasn't until I was in my mid 30s that I realized that I had at least mild, if not moderate ADHD growing up, that I self-medicated with exercise movement. I did really intense cross-country skiing and different sports that really harnessed my focus and really released from my body. And then as I was in graduate school, I also started doing more of my own yoga practice, and then eventually did my yoga teacher training. And that really helped bring more of a understanding and language to why I felt like we needed to integrate the two, because I would see how people would have mental insights and then didn't understand how they were still then repeating these other behaviors. And I think it's really because there was still unresolved body memory that was also could be expressed in nervous system reactivity or just different ways in which they were holding on and stuck in their body, even though mentally maybe they had some insights. And so I actually one day after my yoga teacher training, I started initially by calling myself a yoga psychotherapist. And I had a lot of people reaching out to me, wait a minute, how can you do that? We're not allowed to touch people. We can't do yoga in our session. Are you putting them in downward dog while you're talking to them? And then the yoga is my main somatic tool with my clients, including couples. And when I work with couples dealing with intimacy issues as well. But I do all sorts of somatic stuff by bringing the body into the conversation as well.
Yeah. So is there anything more to say about how this practice, how your work, how bodyfullness taps into our capacity for healing and connection?
Yeah. Well, like you were saying earlier, that mindfulness, even just the word itself, it's so focused on the mind. And, two of the questions I've really had that have fueled my work, my research, and my book is that why have we had this history of a mind-body split where we elevate the mind as the seat of, all reasoning and wisdom, and the body's primitive and savage and gets us into trouble. And then there's also been this split as far as just as feeling good in our body, of having pleasure, and that's bad and that we should repress. And so really, I think of our body and being able to have self-regulation practices and body trust, and that idea of interoception, of that keen body awareness and like reverence for our body and the cause and effect of our mind and body as really the portal to opening up to different types of pleasures. And when we open up to some of those other pleasures just within our own self, it can increase altruism and connection to others, not to mention our own resilience. And of course, all of that really helps with opening up to intimacy in our relationships, whether it be, sexual or platonic. So for me, bodyfullness is definitely a somatic practice, but it's weaving in kind of the anti-repression piece that I think of as
right.
America is one of the most repressed countries in the world. So yeah. Like, how did we get here, and how can we come back to what is so innately, intrinsically human within us? I mean, that's what I also love about bodyfullness. You don't need a prescription or money. It is more of a practice, and cultivating curiosity and figuring out the tools in your own toolbox as far as what your body needs in the moment.
And, this is sort of outside the questions I was going to ask, but it's occurring to me, so I'll ask you anyway. In the beginning of this work with people, it seems to me one of the barriers is just self-acceptance of our body. Like, so many people have body image issues, right? Or self-conscious about their body, or hate their body, or, not only feel detached from it, but actually want to be apart from it. Like, how do you even start to address that in something like this practice?
Right. I think about it really also on a systemic level, about helping people understand that the part of the system we've been raised in, these sick systems, that there's a lot of body othering, body marginalization. And we hear these tales of value being placed on bodies for their performative value, for their skin color, for their shape, for youth. And this idea of body terrorism, and also this epidemic of disembodiment that we're all in, to help people understand that it's not like it's their fault, but that they can become aware of these messages so that they can start their own inner revolution that says this as my truth. And then I also help people understand that bodyfullness doesn't mean that we love being in our body. We're celebrating in our body every day. We're frolicking around, bonbons or something, but that it's understood that there will be moments of pain and discomfort, especially when we override our body's messages. It tells us we're tired and we just keep drinking coffee instead of resting. So it takes time to start to really listen to the language of the body to then get it back into balance. But it's always rooting for our homeostasis, our survival. It always wants us to thrive. And so it's much more, again, an internal approach versus looking from the outside in, of like, what is society telling us health looks like and pleasure looks like in us? And what do we feel from the inside up is pleasurable, is self-agency, is balance.
All right. So speaking about pleasure, you are talking about or writing about 4, you've written here, essential and overlooked types of pleasure. So what are they?
Well, I really focus on 4, even though I would say that there are 5. The one that I don't focus on. Yeah. Which, no, I don't really talk so much about the 5th one being that we can also derive pleasure from more altruistic acts. And that's absolutely important, more than ever. And yet my book is a little bit more geared towards people that don't allow themselves pleasure without guilt. And there's guilt or shame. I think it's lavish. So I only touch upon altruistic pleasure, but I really talk about sensual pleasures that, can be anything from connection to nature, given we have nature deprivation disorder, I guess is what they're calling it. And whether it comes from the senses, whether it be with food and really slowing down and tasting our food and the pleasure of that, or connecting to the outdoors, to fabrics, to sounds, to music, to dance, which that also leads into the other type of pleasure, which is about more playful and creative pleasure, which I think we certainly encourage in children. And then as adults, we make play dates for our kids, but not for ourselves. And play as adults is really helpful for balancing our mind and for helping us to connect to new experiences that can help us with vulnerability and adventure and risk. So it really works in other aspects of our brain as well as a way to express our bodies, playful dancing. Or really what I like about playful pleasures is it's about the process in this world where we're so outcome driven. And that connects to intimacy and pleasure in the bedroom too, where there can be such a focus on just the outcome that people aren't even enjoying kind of the foreplay or the road to get there, but the connection along the way. And so that's where I think also.
Yeah, I definitely talk about sex as adult play. Like, it doesn't have to be so linear, goal-oriented, achievement-focused, but it is play, or it can be play.
And I think that requires being less self-conscious. So I talk about that too, just how a lot of these, and we're self-conscious probably for a reason, given our history in the US, with just how it might look or how we should be and how adults are supposed to be, and that repression piece. Because playfulness is, very much about expression and owning our right to kind of enjoy. So there's that element of that type of pleasure. Also, I talk about flow states, and that can show up either in our livelihood at work, and really when we're so immersed and time seems to fly by because we're so absorbed and enjoying and really resonating with what we're doing. And that can happen not only in our livelihood, but in more of our liveliness outside with adventures or travel or novel experiences.
Yeah.
So that's about, liveliness and adventure and risk and flow states. And then, of course, erotic and sexual pleasure, which is about desire and intimacy and, energetic exchange and that bonding that can come from intimacy. And that, of course, is very loaded and layered and can be confusing for people. I mean, for example, just even when I say the word pleasure, there's this reductionist view that it only means sex. So
right, or only means orgasm, right? Or
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So those are the ones I talk about in the book, and that those other types of pleasure are really building blocks. If people want more erotic pleasure and sexual pleasure, it's going to be really hard if they don't ever really receive sensual pleasures in their day-to-day life, playful pleasures in their day-to-day life, flow states or adventure. And so that's really a foreplay all of its own in our own life. And we can see that balance.
Yeah, it's almost like we're pleasure. I don't want to say focused, but like open in general helps you get pleasure. Hey, we're taking a real quick break here in the middle of the podcast, and I want to share with you a free resource. If you are in a relationship where sexual desire has been an issue, where one of you wants more sex than the other, where one of you or both of you are struggling to feel desire for sex, this is the training for you. It's a free webinar that you can watch on demand. It's called How to Want Sex More, or Help Your Partner To, without feeling pressure or obligation. In it, I cover the 5 biggest mistakes that keep people stuck, blocked from their sexual desire, and it's going to give you ways to approach this differently to start to create a sex life that's really fun and easy for both people. You can sign up at intimacywithease.com/masterclass. And the other thing is, you're talking about these, of course, and seeing how much they overlap. Like, sex could be all 4 of these, right? It could be flow state, it could be sensual, it could be erotic, it could certainly be playful. I mean, these aren't distinct categories, right? There must be a lot of, are experiences where you're getting more than one kind at a time better than ones where you're getting one. I'm even thinking about like a hike out in nature, a sensual pleasure. Is that even better if it's somehow playful, or should I not be adding any judgment into this?
No, I mean, I'm not judgment from it, but so much about just what kind of expansion is possible.
Yeah.
And that absolutely, I think that'd be wonderful to have, they're all interconnected and they can be wonderful in their own right. They can be interconnected, and absolutely, that's sort of a dynamic, nuanced pleasure all of its own. And so I see nothing wrong with being able to combine and add and build your own adventure with all of this.
Yeah.
And, it's also, just like I said earlier, that bodyfullness doesn't mean that we're always feeling, such connection and joy in our body all the time. Right. Same with what I talk about with pleasure. A lot of why I wanted to write more about pleasure beyond just sexual pleasure is that joy and happiness are these undisputed concepts, but pleasure it's stigmatized.
Right.
And just wanting to help people kind of to expand into all the different ways they can embrace all of life's pleasures, and that we do deserve that as humans, but that bodyfullness means also helping us to tolerate and self-regulate so that we can handle pain. We're not running from pain and running to pleasures, but that we're really kind of aware and grounded and honest within ourselves and being able to tolerate emotions and discomfort through somatic practices so that we have a healthier relationship with pleasure.
So if somebody's listening and thinking, wow, I kind of get one or two of those, but maybe not the others, because I don't know, it seems like people might struggle with any one of those four kinds of pleasure. What are ways people can develop more experience with those pleasures or open up those avenues or think about, how do they think about this or what do they do to expand their pleasure?
Well, I would probably start with, if say they were my client or something, I would really start with finding out about their body connection. Are they too stuck in their head and what kind of storylines they might have in their head, as well as just what is their relationship with their body, so that they can start with just being more tuned into their senses. And because if somebody doesn't feel safe day to day, if they're hypervigilant or they're a perfectionist or there's addiction or there's any number of things that can really be these barriers in the first place. So wanting to really help cultivate some body connection. And then, like I said, probably with more slowing down, giving themselves permission to receive, even with just rest, because we have this culture of people overworking. So for a lot of people, maybe start with pleasure as giving yourself a break in the middle of the day, taking your vacation days. When somebody invites you to something and you might still have more work, go and have some time to connect and come back to it. So I think that's a lot of where it needs to start for some people. And certainly a lot of my clients that tend to be high achieving, perfectionist, and just caring for others. So that's how I would start there. Yeah. Just kind of simple day to day before moving into, I think, where it can get trickier, where we engage with others, bring in somebody else to share in our pleasures.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit, about using, let's say, our own awareness of our bodies and our pleasure and how that can inform connection with others or how we share that pleasure with somebody else.
Well, one of the first ththings that comes to mind is then we really know our limits and our boundaries. And that's so essential. And we also then know our desires, what we do and don't want, and help to then really know that that's our right. I mean, boundaries are, Becky Martin was on about boundaries.
Betty Martin. Yeah.
Betty, and I know she's like a boundaries guru, and so this is a soundbite from her that she said boundaries are really anything. It's what we have a right to and a responsibility for.
Right.
So that's where I think embodied mindfulness and having somatic practices and really that deeper interoception with our body, it helps us to know what are our limits, not just in our head, but as we know them emotionally in our body and feel them moment by moment, and can kind of go straight to the source of them to notice what's happening. So I think that then helps us to be able to also express those and state them. I think the more we know ourselves, the more likely we can communicate more directly. And I think that we just have there's more of a body trust than when you are in a situation that might be moving out of your limits or boundaries or towards kind of the more pleasure, that we know it in the moment and be more direct about what we need then versus maybe later. And like I was saying too, also owning our right to pleasures. We think of it as lavish, but it not only helps with our own resilience, but it does help with actual self-compassion for others once we feel that we're really receiving some of our own pleasures. And so I think of that idea of then we'll be more likely to just share and be open to what others might want from pleasure when we're with them. So more of that give and take and energy exchange and giving and receiving.
Is that part of the altruistic pleasures that you're talking about? The pleasure we might have in pleasing someone else or thinking about somebody else? Yeah.
And that's also just inherent in having more pleasure in our life, is that we aren't as tapped, we aren't as empty and then as drained, that we don't even really have much to give. As much as we might mentally want to give more to our partner, we just, in our bodies, we're exhausted. We don't have it. So that we have the idea, but then we're too tired or they're asking too much of us. So with Bodyfullness, I mean, you're much more in balance. It doesn't mean we aren't ever trying to, it's a cycle. I mean, we find our way back.
Right.
But I mean, I think of how, couples, for example, that do yoga together or exercise together and are really physically active together. And there's research that shows us that, physically active couples just have more satisfying sex. They're in their body. They know their bodies. They are, used to kind of moving and breathing side by side with one another. And that says, more than, words. There's that connection made viscerally as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's way more than just, oh, they're fitter and slimmer somehow. They feel, it's not that they're just skinnier or
Right,
it's like they're just
yes.
in their bodies using those in touch, that it's going to make a difference.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of my work with my clients, we move not for how the outer form looks, that those might be some nice side effects of it, but it's really about for our own inner knowing, connection to our intuition and our inner agency and just strength and that inner listening of and just feeling really centered, grounded, connected. That's powerful. And then, if you might lose some weight from it, it doesn't hurt, but again, more of that inside out idea.
All right. So where can people find you and the book? If you want to say, I want to give you a moment to say a little bit about the book specifically so people can find it and find you.
Yeah. So the book is called The Pleasure's All Yours, Reclaim Your Body's Bliss and Reignite Your Passion for Life, which in this time of people really languishing as we are hopefully continuing to come out of the pandemic, I think there's a lot of people that just feel stagnant and blah. So I'm hoping that this can reignite just some more connection to self. It's really about the power of connection to our bodies in order to connect to others on a deeper level, which I know we're all wanting and realizing how important that is when it was taken away from us. Yeah, you can find it. It's through Shambhala Publications, but you can find it through really all the major booksellers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and whatnot. And then I don't know, it might already be out by time this airs, but it comes out end of July. There is a website for the book, which is The Pleasure Is All Yours book.com. And you can also get to that website through mine, which is Dr. Rachel Allyn with a Y, Allyn with a Y. And my Instagram, I've been doing a lot of Instagram lives with others kind of in the field. That's been fun. In fact, I should get you to come and do you have an Instagram? Do one with me.
That would be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's at Dr. Rachel Allyn. I also do, I tended to do a lot of workshops that would integrate somatic stuff with psychology, and I'll hopefully get back to that. But I'm resuming my retreats as well. I do yoga and wellness retreats and incorporate some of these concepts as well.
Okay. And that would all be on your website. So people could find it there. Perfect.
Yes, Jessa, you should come on one. These retreats are the best.
It sounds fun.
1 week's time. It's amazing the transformation that can happen. Granted, I know it's not easy. You kind of have to have some privilege in our lives to be able to go away in a retreat. But
right. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get to know you and question and answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.